2 days ago, Benny Gantz of the Blue and White Party had to surrender his mandate to form a government. He had found that he could not create a coalition with the partners that he had available to him, which was not a huge surprise. Prime Minister Netanyahu's tactics to prevent him from forming a government were very effective, and he had to return that mandate to the president. And that leads us to the events of yesterday, or last night rather, in Israel, where the Attorney General gave down a ruling that Netanyahu will have to be indicted on 3 different cases that he's involved in. Corruption cases and other things. So that actually has an implication on the next stage of government building in Israel, which is there's a 14-day period where anybody, not just Netanyahu or Gantz, but anybody in the Knesset, 120 members, could potentially form a government if they could get enough signatures. They would need 61 recommendations on a list to say that from potential partners, and then that person, if they get the 61 signatures, would get an additional 14 days, but no more, to try and form a government. If that person fails, it completely ends, the process ends, and they automatically go to elections in 3 months. But the implication of the announcement by the Attorney General that Netanyahu needs to be indicted on those charges, while it doesn't mean that any of those cases will actually move forward in the short term, what it does mean in terms of Israel's chances of forming a government in this very delicate and unprecedented period is that Benny Gantz will now be in a situation where he absolutely cannot join into a government with Netanyahu, according to his own previously mentioned statements about how he would find making any sort of government with someone under indictment completely unacceptable. But the interesting but is that the Likud has a challenger candidate in the name of Gideon Sa'ar, and this candidate is fairly popular, and he has been going around as most recently as yesterday and saying that he himself can form a government whereas Bibi can't. So he's already putting himself forward as a replacement candidate for Netanyahu. The Likud is compelled to have primaries before the next election. Now there are ways around that, and Netanyahu is an expert at getting around things that he doesn't want to do when it comes to the party that he leads. But if he fails to prevent that leadership primary, there is a couple of outcomes could happen. One is that Gideon Sa'ar could beat Netanyahu. Netanyahu could win, that's another option. Or Gideon Sa'ar could lose and then split the party and say, you know what, let's say this happens in the next 14 days when there's still a possibility of forming a government. He could go around the party rooms and whisper into people's ears and find enough people who would be willing to join him to make a unity government with Benny Gantz, in which case Gideon Sa'ar would be the rotational prime minister with Benny Gantz. And Gantz has been open to something like that very quietly. He said when you listen to Benny Gantz, he's very clear that his problem is with Netanyahu alone and not in principle with the unity government with the Likud party. So this is an outcome that's definitely out there. It's a possibility. I'd say of all the possibilities that are not the third election, which is the most likely possibility, having a split of the Likud party or having the Netanyahu replaced in a primary are the other 2 options that are, I think, the second level of possibility and the second likelihood.